Welcome back, warriors, to part two of episode chapter two of our podcast, Intimacy and Intercession. Last week we spoke about the characteristics of an intercessor. This week we'll be talking a little bit about some of the characters in the Bible who interceded and the Lord responded to their plea. All right, just before we dive into this, over on YouTube, I got a comment under the video where someone mentioned that an intercessor needs to have a strong faith. And I am here to back that up today because faith that is never tested will never grow strong. First Peter chapter 1 verse 7 says, and I read, that the trial of your faith, being much more precious than of gold that perisheth, though it be tried with fire, might be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ. Goes to show that faith must be put to work, and or it's going to be weak. This is one of the reasons why God permits trials and testings, because in order to have a testimony, we must go through testings, right? And if we should look at physical examples in the world of, let's look at steel, for example. Steel did not become strong to build houses or buildings just like that. It had to be tempered by fire, right? So we understand that as a children of God, we must go through in order to come out as pure as gold and as strong as a steel. So I'm your host, Janelle, and we're going to be talking today a little bit about Abraham, Moses, and Esther, and the circumstances under which they interceded to God, and God came through for them. All right, so we're going to be talking about Abraham, which was known to be one of the first intercessors in the Bible, and how he prayed and cried to God, and he stood between God and the city of Sodom and Gomorrah. So years before Abraham would have emigrated to Canaan, along with Lot, which was his nephew, Lot would have settled in Sodom and Gomorrah, and we all know that Sodom was a sinful city. Right? There was a time when the kings of Mesopotamia, and this can be found in the early parts of Genesis, where the kings of Mesopotamia, they sacked Sodom and they carried off Lot along with other residents, men and women, and they had them enslaved for some time. And when Abraham heard about this, Abraham being the overprotective uncle that he is, what he did was to raise up his own little military force. And he devised a plan where he attacked the Mesopotamian army by night. And through that attack, he was able to rescue Lot and a few men and return them back home. Right? So now, he is faced with another situation where Lot is in trouble. And this time it's not just Lot, but it's Lot, his wife, and his two daughters. Right, so now we see where Abraham is faced again with a situation where he needed to intervene. But this time, he could not have raised up an army because who can stand against the Lord? The songwriter says, no one can, no one will. So nobody can come before God or even raise up an army because, you will never win. So Abraham did the only thing that he knew to do, and that was to go talk to God, to go plead, to intercede, to go bawl to him and bargain. So he went to God. Well, God came to him along with two angels, and he informed him of what he was going to do. This you can find in Genesis chapter 18 from verse 14 downwards. This was this has the whole conversation, the whole dialogue of how Abraham went back and forth, pleading with God. And he asked God, if you search Sodom and Gomorrah and you found 50, if you should find 50 people that are righteous, will you spare the entire city? And after careful consideration and talking and pleading with God, God said, yes, you know what? I will spare them. And Abraham, seeing that God would have responded to that request, he said, well, let me try again. Let me see if I can go down a little bit further. And he went down to 45. And careful deliberation, and the Lord said, okay. He went again and he bargained, and he went to 30, he went to 20, until he went down to 10. Said, God, if you find a 10 that is righteous, will you? And the Lord responded, right, to Abraham. And he said that if I find a 10 that is righteous, I will spare the entire city of Sodom and Gomorrah. And of course, the Lord did search. The angels went and the Lord did search, and he could not find a 10 that was righteous. And he waited until Lot, his wife, and his 2 daughters would have fled the entire city. He destroyed the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. Right? So one thing that, or a few lessons that can be taken away from, this dialogue or this intercession or this whole bargain with God, it is the importance of believers in the world. God would not destroy. See how important we are to God? God would not have destroyed the city as long as he could have found at least 10. He could find a few believers there. He would save the entire city, no matter how sinful they were. Right? So we see where as long as the true church in the world is interceding, the hand of judgment will surely be stayed. Sodom was spared for a time, and this was only because one man that was walking with God interceded and stood in the gap, right? But when Lot and his family were safely out, God destroyed the entire city by fire. I look at St. Luke chapter 8, 17, verse 28 to the 30, right? And it says, as it was in the days of Lot, so shall it be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed. Right? The sins of Sodom are being repeated today, and we have heard preachers say this multiple times, countless times, every time they get a chance. And it is evident when we watch the news. It's evident when we watch the social media these days, right? The sins of Sodom and Gomorrah is being repeated. They're being repeated today. And you would hear preachers say it's back with a vengeance. It's a double, triple times what used to happen back in Sodom days, right? When we look at the wickedness of the nation, we look at the immorality, when we look at the dishonesty that we encounter from day to day, the craftiness of people, the violence is unheard of. The ungodliness of the world surpasses the days of Lot, right? And God is bitter. God is bitter. But we're thanking him because he is faithful, he is merciful, and he is gracious, right? And he listens to the intercessors that are consistently standing in the gap, right? And are praying on behalf of the nations. Because whether or not you believe it, there are intercessors praying right around the world. At every prayer watch that is listed, you have an intercessor or a group of intercessors that are praying and weeping on behalf of this sinful nation. And this is what is holding back the hand of the Almighty God. In St. Matthew chapter 5, verse 13, Jesus said, ye are the salt of the earth. Right? One thing that we have to understand about salt is that it preserves. And one thing that we have never spoken about as it relates to salt is that it delays the process of rotting, the process of going bad, the process of scaling. It prevents such process. We always talk about it, adding flavor and it preserving. But growing up in a household where my dad, as a butcher, right, is always preserving meat, especially pork. I know that, salting pork for an extended period of time, it cannot go beyond a certain point because it's going to go terribly bad. So, from my understanding and from practical examples and my own experience with the meat, I can truly say or safely say that salt will retard corruption, right? It will it will delay the meat from going bad, but it will not prevent it from going bad, right? So it's the same for us as children of God today. We are considered to be salt of the earth, right? And us the salt, have to stand in the gap as intercessors, right? Just as in Abraham was able to delay the process of God destroying Sodom, but he was not able to prevent God from destroying Sodom, right? The same goes for us as intercessors today. We can stand in the gap and intercede on behalf of the sinful nation, the sinful world, right? But what we're doing is delaying the judgment process, right? We're delaying corruption, but we cannot stop it. We can't prevent it from happening, right? We can't prevent it from happening. So what we need to understand is that as intercessors, we also have the ability to get God's attention. We have the ability to change his decision. We have the ability to move his hand. Because if you realize, when Abraham went to God the first time, he responded. He agreed. He said, if there is, yes, I will. Right? So we understand that when we go to God, when we intercede on behalf of not just ourselves, but others, it moves him to move in a particular direction. Right? So this is the first example of someone who pleaded, who interceded, and they got results. So some people would say that, this is an intercession that failed, but it did not. It did not fail because God honored his word. He said in his words that before any of my word pass, heaven and earth shall pass away. And he did say that if I find 10, I will spare. But he did not find 10. He was able to only find Lot, his wife, and his 2 daughters. And so he destroyed as he said that he would have. One thing we have to understand is that God is a God of mercy, but he's also a God of judgment. Right? Let's talk about Moses and how Moses also, by intercession for Israel, was able to hold back the judgment of God. In this case, he was able to hold back the judgment of God. Right, so we understand that Israel was noted as God's chosen people, and he has taken them out of Egypt's bondage. He delivered them from Pharaoh and his army when he drowned them all in the Red Sea. Now they are faced with another situation where Moses had disappeared for some time. Moses went up to Mount Sinai with God, for 40 days and 40 nights. And this was where he got the 10 commandments written down on 2 stone tablets, right? And this is the thing. So when we're seeking God for direction, let me just interject in the story and just say this. When we're seeking God for direction, it's not a one prayer business, right? It sometimes requires us to change our location. It requires sometimes isolation, and not isolation in the sense where, you're, in the not isolation in the negative sense, but isolation in where you shut out the noise that is around you, right? And you just hear just you and God, right? These things most times happen for extended periods of a quiet time with God, because only voice that you need to hear is that of God in this time. It requires asking for direction, requires you to go up a little higher, both physically and spiritually. Just like Moses went up to the mountains. Sometimes we need to escape into the mountains to hear, thus saith the Lord. I remember back in 2021, right? I was talking to God concerning something, concerning direction, concerning my next step, my next move. And, I got writers would say I got to a writer's block where, I could hear nothing, I could feel nothing, nothing is happening. Me just slept on a dead lock, right? And I was just there. I could not, like, I couldn't push past this point. I stuck, consider myself stuck. And I was talking to God the morning, and I heard him download in my spirit, go up to the mountains. And there's a prayer mountain in a certain area that, churches usually go to on, designated days, and they, for fasting and prayer, and we just talk to God there. The Lord instructed me to go to that said mountain. And I got up the morning very, very early because I had every intention of going to the mountain. And I remember just before I drove out to the morning, I heard I felt the sudden urge to to get a pedicure, right? And I said, when I come back, I'll go do the pedicure. But then it dawned on me, like it just came down heavily on me, go do it before. So I took up the phone, and I was searching for a nail tech's number that I had met back in 2018, right? I met her one time, I took her number, and that was it. And I searched until I found the number. I didn't even remember her name. And I searched and I found it. And I called her and I asked her if, if she was located at the same place, and if I can come by for a pedicure right away in the morning. This was somewhere when I was 6 o'clock in the morning. And she answered, and she said that she was not located there anymore, and she informed me of her change of location. And I went to that location. I was on my way to actually going to the mountains, so I stopped. And when I went there, I felt the sudden urge. I saw her, and she was getting ready to come, and take care of me. And of course, we did the regular gestures. Good morning, how are you? What are you gonna do today? Blah blah blah. And we did that. And when she was ready to do my nails, what came out of my mouth was, "Can you help me pray?" Hey. And I kid you not, the lady went down in prayer and supplication and intercession. I did not even tell her what to pray for, what to pray about, but she did pray. And everything that she would have consulted God on, everything that she would have uttered, was everything that I needed answers for. And I was just there in the spirit, watching God download every single thing in her spirit as she made utterance. When we were through praying, I stood up, and when I looked on the outside, on the balcony, I realized that I was overlooking a certain area. And at the same time, it came into my spirit that this was where I was sending you in the first place, but you thought I was sending you up in the mountains. This is similar to the mountain experience that you thought you would have had. This is exactly where I was sending you. I'm saying that story to tell you that, you know, physically, I was not down on the plane.